cut 1 self. That means self fabric, that we're going to do the whole thing in knit jersey. Okay, we can put today's date. You can put your name, and we can put a style number. That's usually the order, and there's more information too. Front cut 1 self, this is a knit jersey, the date, your name, a style number. So we've trued up the pattern, it's in pencil, this is the front. We want to check a couple measurements. This is supposed to be 8 1/4. Oh good, it is. This is supposed to be 9 1/2. It is 9 5/8. Let me go ahead and mark it. I think I like it 9 5/8. And this needs to be 10 1/4. Let's check this. This is all, let me see, right off by 1/16. Let's just bring that out. So right here, I'll correct and bring the hip out. Little change. And if I feel like it, I can bring this chest in that little bit. So you can take a couple measurements, and then you can true up the pattern with something permanent. So look, I can go back with my pen and to confirm and true up the rest of the lines, since I've taken a couple measurements. And things are very close to being perfectly accurate for the copy. Now we'll do the side seam. I brought that in a little 1/8. Here I'm bringing it out, that 1/8. And it's just at the hem, and I'm blending into the other lines I have because the waist was fine. Don't need to correct that. Hem looks nice, straight at the center front. We've got a nice little curve going on here. You can take more measurements in the shoulder and in the neckline, but a lot of this comes out so accurate if you copy it correctly that you don't need to change very much. This is what's called a first pattern. If I was going into production with this, I would take many measurements. But if this is a first pattern and I'm doing something casual, it's not going to be mass produced, then this is a perfectly fine method to use without having to take 40 different measurements or 30 different measurements. You take 2 or 3. And take the length or the shoulder too as well. We have the front neckline, the back neckline. Whole body's trued now. We've adjusted it just a couple small little places. Now we'll put on the seam allowance. So this being a knit, even though the garment has 1/4 of an inch right now, it started with 3/8. It gets trimmed down by the overlock machine to 1/4. So we need to start with 3/8. And if you feel more comfortable sewing a different amount of seam allowance, please do. But for the industry, this is what the industry uses. For home sewing, they might have 5/8 and then you have to trim it or something. So we've just done curved 3/8 inch seam allowance in the armhole. Now we'll do our side seam. I'm placing the ruler 3/8 of, here's the stitch line. I'm placing the ruler 3/8 of an inch in, and then I can easily draw the seam allowance 3/8 of an inch out. Like to do some little short lines, and then come back and connect everything with the curve ruler. Here's the short lines. And you do not have to be pattern making on the cardboard right now, but I didn't want to move it as of now. Just focusing on the video. I'm adding the hem allowance, and this was about 3/4. Let's go ahead and add it on, placing my ruler on the 3/4 inch mark, making my nice curved line. And I always start with the ruler straight here at the hem at center front. You don't want to have a pointed weird hem. Now we can start curving it up. Nice and blended. Let's bring that seam allowance down, even though we're going to have to angle that back in. Take a little bit off. Now we're going to do the neckline seam allowance. We'll do it for the front and the back. Right on the same copy for the moment. There's the front neckline seam allowance. Let's do the back neckline seam allowance. Again, the straight part of the ruler is at the center back and center front. And I like to have enough seam allowance to work with in production. Nice right angles. Even though this isn't a production pattern, this is just a first pattern to start. When you first make a pattern, it's called a first pattern. Then you work on a fitting and the fabric and work with a fit model, and it can go into production after changes and alterations and corrections if need be. So now we have the whole front and back in one. And we're going to go ahead and trim the seam allowance down and make a copy of the front and back and turn it into the next pattern piece. So let's go ahead and trim our seam allowance. And if you want to keep those measurements, go ahead now and write them on the inside of the pattern. With a nice sharp pair of scissors, let's go ahead and cut out your side seam. Let's go ahead and cut your hem. Cutting out our back neckline, cutting out our shoulder, now let's cut out our armhole. That's from the low point of the shoulder going down into the armhole. There's our front and back all in one. We're going to continue on and make a separate back in a moment and true up our sleeve. Stay tuned to video number 2. Thanks. See you in the next video.